Alright, so per the request of Jesse Lowe, we're going to make a little bit of mole with some game birds. The first thing you need to do is actually make a flavorful stock. If you don't do this step, it's not a big deal, but you've got to cook the pheasant, or as we have here, goose. You can also do this with chicken too, or just use chicken stock and cook chicken. But we had some goose in the freezer, so we're going to use some goose today. Very, very important, very first step is you first have to grab a beer. Do you have your beer?
No.
I thought that was your beer?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get your beer because this is a little bit of a process, so you've got to have a beer to work through it. But for this, usually we use maybe 3 birds, 6 breasts or so. I've got several ducks and a couple geese here. I'm going to make a double batch, but I'll put all the ingredients and stuff together for a single batch for you. But we're also going to be using a pressure cooker to make the stock. Works a lot faster, a lot better. If you don't have a pressure cooker, go get one, because it definitely will speed up a lot of the different things that you do, and it's great for making soups and stocks and those kinds of things. So very first we'll actually add the goose and duck in here. I'm going to put it in, Charlie. The pressure cooker. You don't want to touch it? No? Put that there in the bottom. We're going to add some carrots. You don't need to peel them or anything, just wash them up real good and cut them so they'll fit. Half an onion. These are some guajillo chilies that I throw in there for some extra flavor, and they'll cook and plump up and add a good rich flavor to the broth. A couple sticks of celery, a couple cloves of garlic. I also kept some of the bones after filleting the geese and the ducks off, because I think they add a really good flavor to the stock. You're going to strain all this off anyhow and then shred the meat afterwards. In here we've got a couple of bay leaves, some Mexican oregano, and a few peppercorns. And then we're going to add, in this case, we're going to add 2 quarts of water into here. And I usually add some salt, but I've been brining these to get sort of all the blood and guts and gore off the geese after filleting them, because they were a little bit bloody. So I think they're already going to have a good enough salt in there, and we can always adjust it at the end. We're not making a soup or anything. So we'll lock this down in the pressure cooker and start that up. Oops, wrong one. And now we'll cook the stock and be back in a minute.
When the pressure cooker gets up to temperature, turn it down and cook it for about 30 minutes or so. I like to cook it on about 10 pounds of pressure. If you're doing this in a regular pot, you're going to want to bring everything up to a boil, skim off any scum that gets to the top, and then cover it and turn it to low and simmer it for about, 2 to 3 hours, maybe even longer. You're going to have to cook it for quite a bit just to get that meat tender, so that then you can shred it and extract all the goodness from all the bones and everything else that's in there. That's the beauty of the pressure cooker, is all it really takes is about a half hour or so. Let's talk mole. There are several brands out there that are commercially produced and available at almost any market, or if you're lucky enough to have a Latino or Mexican market near you. I really like this Dona Maria brand, especially this dark mole that they have. They make several other kinds like mole verde and other things, but this dark mole really does the trick and seems to balance well with a lot of strong flavors, especially if you have some darker game meat, but works just as well with chicken. The other benefit of using the dark mole, which you can't do with some of the other mixes, is that you can incorporate some great flavors of chocolate. This right here that you're seeing, this Ibarra chocolate, is actually a tablet on the right hand side that comes in this package of a chocolate drink mix. And it's got cinnamon and other flavors in there, as well as some sugar. If you don't like it very sweet, you can actually use baker's chocolate. And if you don't have access to these Mexican drink mixes, you can take a couple squares of baker's chocolate and actually add some teaspoons of sugar or something of that nature, just so that you can get that sweet flavor in there. I sometimes like it sweet, sometimes not, so we actually mix it between the two, and usually like the flavors of both just kind of alternate every other time. After 30 minutes in the pressure cooker, you can take the top off and then strain out all of the ingredients from the pot. You want to use a fine mesh strainer or something that's broader. Maybe you line it with some cheesecloth or something like that, but you want to try and catch all the little particles that get in there. And if you look at how rich that broth is, that's one reason to use the pressure cooker. Also, that's another reason to make sure you keep the bones. So now set all that stuff aside and let it cool down a little bit because it's kind of nuclear hot when you get it out of there. And then separate the meat from the rest of the stuff. When the meat gets below about 2000 degrees Kelvin, you can now shred it up. That's also, I hate to sound like a recording for the National Association of Pressure Cookers, but look at how easy that stuff is to shred. It's really dry at this point, but we're going to add it back into the mole, and that's going to reinvigorate it and allow a lot of moisture to build in there. If you've got bones in there, like using a whole chicken or something like that, you would shred those bones and any of the other bits and pieces and throw all those away.
Dale, Barquito, dale. Dale, Barquito, vamos. No, Barquito, no te metas ahí, no, pelotudo. Vení acá. Hola, Jorge. ¿Querés un globito? ¿Qué haces ahí abajo? Vivís en las alcantarillas, como los pobres. Puedo darte globos, Jorge. Globos que flotan por arte de magia. Los globos flotan porque la densidad del helio es mucho menor que la densidad del aire. Y en consecuencia el peso de los globos, considerando el helio en su interior, es menor que el empuje producido por el aire desplazado. Así que metete el globo en el orto y mandale saludos al maestro Splinter, pelotudo.
Now it's time to put the mole together. So heat a Dutch oven over medium-high heat to high heat. Put in a little bit of oil once it's hot and add the other half of your reserved onion that you've diced up. Cook the onion down for about 5 to 7 minutes until it's translucent and starts to brown around the edges. It's not really going to cook a whole bunch more after you add the liquid. But the next thing that I do is I'll take the mole that I've taken out of the jars, because it's kind of a pain in the ass to get it out of the jars. So I'll put it in a bowl and add it in there. You can see how sticky it is and how difficult it is to get in there. But what we really need to do is get it in there and start to loosen it up a little bit, because it's really just a thick paste of oil and seasonings and all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to get it into this hot pan, start breaking it down, and slowly add a little bit at a time some of the broth that we've made earlier after we kind of break this stuff up. And each time I add a little broth, I'll stir it up and mix it in, and it's going to kind of thicken with each one of those pieces. And keep adding broth, keep mixing, keep adding broth, keep mixing, all that kind of stuff. But it really helps it to break down. Otherwise, you end up with big giant chunks that take a long time to kind of cook out of it. So you can see what I'm doing here is just sort of adding a little bit, mixing it up, adding a little bit more. Once you get all the broth in there, you can add your chocolate. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in all of the different meat that's left over there that I've shredded over on the other side, and stir all that up and let it cook. I usually will bring it back up to a boil, reduce the heat to low, and simmer it covered for maybe an hour to two. If it's too thick, you can add a little bit of water or more broth to loosen it up. If it's actually too thin, it's going to, be something that you take the top off and let the steam evaporate and let it thicken up. Usually, though, it thickens while it cooks, so don't be too quick to actually reduce it, because it will thicken upon cooking. What you end up with is an awesome mole. You can serve it with tortillas. We'll usually just heat up tortillas and make burritos or tacos and serve it with a bunch of different veggies and cheese and different things. You can also take it and smother burritos with it, or use it inside of enchiladas. You can take it and put it on top of tamales, whether you buy them or make them yourself. But it's an awesome mole that'll freeze for 3 to 4 months at a time, and you can put it in the fridge and eat on it for about a week or so and just kind of chip away. But that's it. So hope you enjoy this mole of game bird.